Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Thanks for joining us under the hood.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. 866-594-4150. Let's go right to the phones because Wayne has been waiting for a while as we started up here. Wayne is in Georgia, and you are on the Under the Hood Show. Wayne, what can we do for you?
Yes, I really love the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a 1994 Chevrolet work truck. It has a V6 in it. And it only has 74,000 miles on it. But I've already replaced my water pump, alternator. Actually replaced my alternator last week. Now, the AC compressor is making a noise. Since it's time related on this, does that happen to these components? And what else do I need to check on my AC to get it back up and running?
Well, I was working on one of these yesterday. I put an alternator on one and a gas tank because it was rusted out. You probably don't have that problem where you're at. But fuel tank straps and brake line.
Was that a V6 too?
That was V6.
Work truck?
5-speed manual trans.
Manual
work truck,
trans.
Silverado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, manual
All right.
trans, 5-speed. So the alternator, the bearings were going out, is making noise. It's had a water pump on it, but the air conditioner in this one is shot as well, and it just grinds. So looking at this one to repair it, because it's grinding, we'd be looking at a compressor, a condenser, a new dryer, accumulator. Of course, that's normal whenever you've got a system open like that, if it's old or contaminated at all. And then one of the line sets, they call it the manifold line set because it's got mufflers on it, two little cans that are welded into the line set. So to get yours going again, it's probably got some contamination in it and things like that. The parts are not that expensive. Something you could do yourself at home, and then you would have to have a shop recharge it for you. If it's already empty,
Okay.
If it's empty, you wouldn't be able to use a can of the over-the-counter refrigerant like you see in the store, like AC Pro and things like that, because you'd need to evacuate it first. But for you to do it, if the system's already empty, it would consist of unbolting the compressor and the lines you see that go up to the firewall, to the silver can there, the accumulator, and then the lines that go up front to the condenser. You can purchase a condenser that goes behind the grill, that line set, the compressor, and then that accumulator that goes on the firewall. And usually in the southern climate areas, I remember being in Texas that we could get the accumulators off of the firewall with some wrenches. Up here, you usually can't, and we have to cut them off and sometimes put an evaporator in because they corrode in there. They get salt in there, and it's horrible on them. But you could do all that yourself for a reasonable price. I think if you search at an auto parts store for all those brand new, you're probably going to end up with maybe $500 into parts, and then you go down to your local mechanic that you've been using and recharge probably a couple $100 there, and then you'd have a brand new AC system that should last you, I would think at least another 10 years before you'd have to do major service to it in your climate.
And if the truck is really clean and you had a compressor that just lost the seals and it's it hasn't filled the system with contamination, you might be able to get by for less than that. But
just a compressor and accumulator, maybe.
Yeah, at that point. So that would be even less money. Yeah.
I had it charged up just to see what it would do. It lasted probably 2 weeks, and it went down.
If it lasted 2 weeks, it probably is the compressor that's leaking on it. The compressor bodies were famous for leaking. If you see oil on the compressor on the outside of it, then it's definitely leaking. And that clutch, in the front of it, that hub's rotating all the time, and it's just a little rubber seal in their O-ring, and it'll wear as they go out. And the ones that, some of them have the Teflon up there too, but they wear out and they'll start leaking out the front.
Wayne, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. it's not weird at all when I step back and think about it, but it does. I always notice when you talk about procedures that are just different, completely different in one part of the country, and not when we talk about like, well, in the South, it's not, or this area is not as rusty as this area, but just the entire. You could be a mechanic for 25 years and go into a different part of the country and not be able to do what those guys can do every day just because you're not doing it.
It's different. There's some places, if you had a guy come up here from Texas and expected him to, East Texas, and expected him to work on suspension, they'd be so frustrated trying to take that stuff off. The stuff we take for granted, like we look at that car and go, there's a 92 Subaru. We're going to put a control arm on it. I'm going to go grab my cutting torch. I'm going to grab my cutoff wheel. I'm going to grab my biggest hammer I got in my press, and I'm going to start ripping the stuff off, and I'm going to put it on, and I'm going to do it fairly quickly. Well, if I'm coming up here from Texas, I'm going to grab a ratchet, maybe an impact, and I'm just going to take it apart, and it's going to fall off like melted butter.
Like you're taking a control arm off an ATV or something,
Right.
And they just don't expect it. And then if we go down there expecting to run a business on putting a bunch of head gaskets in and intake gaskets and things, and they go, well, I've never replaced those.
Yeah.
What do you mean you never replaced them? We replace them all the time on these cars. They fail like crazy. Not around here. Different temperatures, different climates will really affect things differently.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Ryan. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Ryan, what can we do for you?
Hello, gentlemen. So a buddy of mine just bought a 2009 Suburban LTZ with the power liftgate.
Yeah.
And it appears that the buttons don't work to open it from the outside. The control above the rearview mirror works and the key fob works. Is that a common failure point, those little buttons on the bottom side of the handle?
Yes. Yeah. We put a lot of handles on the back of those. I think they're pretty cheap. I want to say they're like $70, something like that, for a new handle with the buttons and everything on it, right from the dealership.
With the buttons. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we've put a lot of those on. They just
that seems like it would be a obvious weak point.
Yeah, you're pushing it all the time. It's out there and exposed to the elements, and sometimes you can, if you really spend a lot of time messing with it back up there in the back, and
doing
pushing, and then it starts to work. Well, then for sure the button's bad. You might get one more open out of it, maybe.
Can you spray anything to peel about the little?
It's a pretty enclosed switch assembly, like a modular switch assembly. It's not like open.
So when it goes, it goes.
Yeah, it's pretty much done. You also just inspect the wiring, just like a door jamb. Go into that hatch and make sure the wiring isn't. And sometimes from slamming them, if people have slammed them over time, that'll raise some heck with them. And we've even seen plugins broke back there, where people have been investigating. They fixed something else and they got a wire pinched when they put it back together. Mm-hmm. So I'd start with just a good investigation first, just a little take apart and look.
Ryan, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturtevant's.
Find out how you can participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's talk to David. You're on the Under the Hood Show. David, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I have a 1976 Datsun King Cab 4-wheel drive pickup. And it has a 2.2 liter in it. And I'm just curious, why does it have it has 8 spark plugs. It's got 2 or 4 on the intake side and 4 on the exhaust side.
It's the only way they can get those things to run. Got to get them extra hot.
Well,
No. It's called waste spark. It's for emissions.
It is?
Yeah, it's an emissions thing.
Yeah. Because let me tell you something. It's a workhorse, and I ain't afraid to take it anywhere,
I learned to drive. One of my first vehicles was a 1974 or 75. Might even have been a 76 Datsun pickup. 2-wheel drive with a straight stick. And that was the first vehicle I learned about ruining a clutch in.
Did they ever make it with an automatic in 76?
I don't know.
I don't know if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, but it was a 2-wheel drive, and it was orange. And, of course, it had the 6-lug wheels, so we put the Chevy pickup wheels we found on another truck on the back and had bigger tires on the back.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
And that's why I burned the clutch out, I figured out.
That was a hot truck in the
Mine wasn't hot.
80s.
Mine was not hot.
No, but
it had a smell to it.
The mini truck movement of the 80s was something. It started out in California, out in the West Coast, and then we saw it there in East Texas about 84 it was coming on, and there were so many of these little trucks that were jacked up in the back, big tires, bed covers, convertible roofs you could get for them. The kits are T-top roofs, and everybody, that had one of these and customized it really had, they were just neat to look at, so many different ones. But they used the 8 spark plugs for waste spark. They used them in many other vehicles too, and they still use them today. You've got 2 spark plugs in each cylinder in the Dodge Hemi engines, and it's kind of a pain because now when you're spending $21 a spark plug and you've got 16 of them to replace, it's crazy.
It adds up in a hurry. So this Datsun pickup that you've got, 4-wheel drive king cab, is it clean and not rusty? Because or is it just a rough one?
Well, it is. It's clean. It's not rusty. I bought it about 30 years ago, and it now has a little over 400,000 miles on one overhaul, and I'm on my 3rd clutch.
That's impressive. So this is probably a Berkeley classic. We have them as one of our partners.
Berkeley One Classic. Guess the color of the
definitely
vehicle.
They definitely could have some coverage for you on this. So we got to guess the color of your vehicle. So don't tell us.
We should get a jingle
for the Berkeley One Classic color guess.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll have to hit them up with that.
I'll go first.
All right.
I'm gonna go with like a gold yellow, the orange. How it was like a soft orange, a soft yellow. I'm gonna go with a soft yellow.
Russ?
I think it's gray.
Gray.
I think that it is white.
White. All right, David, what color is your Datsun?
White.
White. There you go.
White pickup.
Awesome.
I love the term king cab in this truck too.
Oh yeah, that was one of the first vehicles that had the extended cab, and they would say king right on the side of it. But and it
was about 6 inches.
Yeah.
Literally.
And that one, if I remember, it's got the little window, doesn't it, on the side? Does it have the window cut out, or is yours with them? It does.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I was joking about 6 inches, saying it's like 8 or 10.
No,
right?
I want to say, so that extended portion of your cab back there, does it just go back? How far from like the back of your headrest when the seat's all the way back to the back glass does it go? Is there about 6 inches of room in there?
Well, something, it had jump seats, and I could get my kids could ride back there, but I could get an adult to sit back there.
Okay, so it's bigger than I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it being pretty small, but I was a big kid at that age when all those trucks were around.
I remember the jump seats in the Datsuns and the Nissan. I was kind of just being quiet over because I was trying to think.
They're on the
through
sides, weren't they?
Yeah, and they'd flip down.
Yeah.
The little jump seats they'd have.
I don't know that I've ever ridden in the back seat of one of those trucks.
I have sat back there just to see if I could.
David, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Nebraska and talk to Tom. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Tom, what can we do for you?
Hi, guys. My granddaughter has a 2013 Ford Focus SE sedan, flex fuel version with a 6-speed automatic. She bought it a couple years ago. It needs replacement front tires on the thing, and when she bought it, the previous owner apparently had put 215/65 16s on the factory OEM rims. This thing is supposed to have 215, at least Ford says it should have 215/55 16 tires on there. I mean, it's a pretty tight fit, but apparently on the front it doesn't rub when you turn corners or things like that. But kind of needing a recommendation as to that much of an upsize on tires, if that's a good idea or an acceptable idea, or maybe we should back it off to 215/60 R16s on the front. I'm not knowing what tires to put on this thing.
Well, you need the same size tires all the way around because of things like your ABS sensors. All of them need to read exactly the same speed, and you need the factory size tire because there's no adjustment of the speedometer calibration when you change tires like you can with a truck. You can't just get a tuner and go swapping that thing out. So what's going to happen is you've got a bigger tire. If they're both 215s and it's supposed to have a 55, but you have a 65, it means that the sidewall is 65% of the tread width instead of 55, which means you have a taller tire than the factory. And they may have been cheaper for somebody to buy, but ask this question if you're ever at a tire store, Chris.
What is that what it means?
Yes, it does. 65%. So what happens is
I'm glad he said it because I couldn't remember it exactly.
Your tire is taller than the factory, which means per mile it's going to turn less revolutions, which means now you've got a person driving this car who thinks they're going 65 miles an hour is probably actually going 71.
I have a bigger concern than that, Russ, with the transmission in that car.
And that problem too.
Being very finicky in those cars. We have I'm glad the car is working good and going good. That's awesome. But I would want to make sure that computer was giving all the accurate inputs into that transmission control module to make all its decisions on the shifting in that transmission. And so not even so much as what the speed that's displaying.
That's what I was
just all the different sensors that are saying, all right, at this RPM I'm doing this, but it doesn't know that it's already going here. You're changing the load rating on there. For people that are out there listening to our hoodies, open up your driver's door jamb and look at the factory sticker, which is usually applied somewhere in that B-pillar. It's on the door. Most of the time it's on the B-pillar, and it's going to show you right there what the factory tire was on the vehicle, and it's also going to show you what the air pressure is supposed to be in that tire on that, including the spare on that sticker. It's a federal mandated sticker. So you need to abide by that, and if you couldn't abide by it for some reason, you need to get on one of these websites, which there's a plethora of them on the internet, that will tell you the equivalent tire size, so that if you go wider or different calibration of your tire size, that you end up with the same rollout for the tire. And so we kind of went off on a tangent on your question, but we would highly encourage you to get back to the factory tire size unless it's just not available.
Well, and that is too, the speedometer, the driver could adjust and just know. Mm-hmm. But the car needs to know because of, like we were just talking about it. That number is important to other systems. The car
communicates with so many things based on that speed input, and if it's not accurate, it's going to make inaccurate decisions. It's the old computer garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't know any better to adjust and say, oh, by the way, when you look at my speedometer, I'm not speeding. I'm going less than that, or I'm going more than that. The computer can't do that.
Tom, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Make a radio appointment each week to hear the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us on the Under the Hood Show. Don't forget, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you join the Hoodie Fan Club at UnderTheHoodShow.com, you could win a hoodie.
Like Terry Scott. Congratulations from all of us here under the hood and our friends over at Universal Technical Institute. You can find them at uti.edu and learn about ways you can get automotive training so that you could be a better mechanic or a fresh new mechanic. Just right out of school, going into the trade, get paid well, learn all about it so you can feel confident in what you're doing. Campuses all over the country. Check them out today.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Kenneth in Indiana. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Kenneth, what can we do for you?
I've got a 89 Ford truck, and I can get it to run for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then it fizzles out like it's out of gas. And it's got 2 dual tanks on it. And could it be the switching between the 2 tanks?
Well, the way an 89 works, there's a couple different styles they use, but most of them have a diverter valve up front, and then they use 2 fuel pumps, one in each tank, to apply pressure to that valve, and it switches over to feed the fuel back to the tank that it belongs in. And one of their famous problems was that they would have an issue where the fuel pump would leak in the tank, and when you turned one on, the fuel would go up to the engine and then return to the other tank, the wrong tank, because the valve would be bad, and fill up the other tank, and it would overflow that tank, and sometimes the engine would run poorly in the meantime because it wasn't getting full fuel pressure. So it would go back. So their fix was, at first, they wanted to put 2 new fuel pumps in it, but most people said, I'm not spending at the time like $800, whatever it was. I'm not putting those in. So they had these little check valves that were a recall because people were annoyed with it, and then it became a safety hazard because fuel would dump out of the tank and get around the exhaust. They didn't like that. So they had this little check valve you snap on right at the pump where the line connects. Those have, I don't think you've been able to find those things in decades now. It's been so long since I've seen one of those available for sale anywhere. So you'd have to put a pump in it to fix that issue if it's doing that. And how we start to find out what's wrong with it, we need to put a fuel pressure gauge on it at the engine. And we need to switch back and forth between the 2 tanks and, run on each tank for a couple minutes and see what those pressures are. And if we see it's lower on one than the other, more than likely it's returning back to the other tank. So we would plug that line off and see if the pressure comes up. If it does, we know we need to replace that fuel pump. But it sounds to me like you've got a problem in the pumps or that valve returning the fuel back, one of the two. And because of the age, it's pretty common. We saw them start to fail at about 10 years.
Check the lead wires off the battery too, and make sure that you've got good connections of not only the main hot wires, but the small positive and the small negatives that come off, and that they're all complete and not getting rotted, because I've seen those intermittently come loose, and then it won't power up the computer circuit, and it won't fire the fuel injection, and the truck will not run from time to time. It can be really fussy that way. I had an uncle's truck that did that. I just remembered that as you were bringing up an 89 Ford pickup. So might be something to check into.
Does that help you out there, Kenneth?
Yeah. Those 2 lines, where do I find those that runs to it?
They'd be at the pump itself.
Just right there.
Yep, they come off the pump. You've got 2 lines on each fuel tank that run up to the diverter valve under the driver's side of the cab. You might want to have a shop take a peek at that, because it's not super complicated system, but it's enough that a shop that is for older people that are familiar with it would recognize it, because I know anybody probably in their 30s has not actually worked on one of those, because I myself haven't had to work on one of those in over 10 years. So
and it used to be very commonplace that people were coming in with problems with those.
So the likelihood of a newer mechanic knowing what's going on which would cost you more money, because they'd have to spend more time doing it.
Kenneth, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Minnesota and talk to Ed. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Ed, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I talked to you a few weeks ago about a Chevy Tahoe that had a steering pump problem.
Sure.
And you told me change fluids and this and that. But you were mentioning at the time that there was a service bulletin on that power steering pump.
We talked about a Caravan with a power steering pump that you change fluid in, and that you had that there was a service bulletin on. The only service bulletin that's been on that type of truck that we've ever seen for steering would be for the power steering pump. There's a valve on the back of it that regulates pressure, and if it has that design pump, it was for the speed sensor on the steering column inside the steering angle sensor that senses what position the steering wheel's in and adjusts pressure. What kind of problems are you having?
It squeals when you turn only. When you turn the wheels, it makes a real bad noise, and it doesn't seem to do it while it's relaxed, if you're not turning the wheels. So they changed the fluids on it. This is a Chevy Tahoe, and they changed the fluids on it, but it didn't really seem to do the trick.
What year is that again? 2000? Is it a 2010 or was it what year was that again?
It was a 2002 was the Chevy Tahoe.
And it squeals when you turn the wheel.
Correct.
Well, that's got a serpentine belt on it that's self-adjusting. So if it's squealing when you're turning the wheel and the squeal is coming from the pump under the hood, if it's a whine, it's either a pump problem or a fluid problem. You're getting air in there, or the pump's worn out. But if it's a squeal from the belt, then you could have some contamination on the pulley surfaces. And to repair that, we have to clean all the pulleys meticulously. Which
Do you need me to make my squeal noise as an example?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Oh.
Is that what it sounds like?
Bad transmission, and it is the Dodge Caravan that was the 2010. That's the one that they're currently using.
All right, so I had the ears crossed up there between you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, you're gonna have to have that belt. Just that, I'm thinking you just have a problem with the belt system, and I know like Gates makes a nice setup to be able to replace the belt and the tensioners
on both the Caravan and on the Tahoe.
Yeah, and so they make that stuff pretty affordable comparably to like OEM often, and it is, Gates is synonymous with belts for years and years and years. You can see the Gates symbol hanging on the wall up in the shops when you used to stock all the different fan belts hanging along the side of the shop. Well, that was a thing gone by, isn't it?
Seems, yeah, for sure. Just hanging up there.
Just hanging up there, getting old.
On pegs. What's the difference between a whine and a squeal? How was my squeal, by the way?
Scared me.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think you might hurt
yourself.
yourself.
Sound like I just stepped on a dog's foot or something.
That's exactly what it sounds when you start it.
A whine is going to be more gear pump as it's turning.
That's a squeal.
Yeah, that was an air squeal.
But still, though, did you hear that sound? That
was
was
like the vacuum leak noise, didn't it?
Yeah, it's like a resonant hum that is amplified.
Okay,
is what I guess that's the best thing I can come out of with a whine.
Okay,
but a squeal is more high pitched and just chirpy, squealy. You can, I don't know. When you've heard them both, they're just completely different.
I agree.
You're putting me in a box in here. I'm trying to think how to describe it.
I know.
Squeal sounds more like a pig squealing.
Yeah,
it is hard to describe, but you know it. If you don't know the difference, it's because you're not hearing it.
The sound the tire makes when you spin it and it squeals. That's a squeal. You'd hear that in a belt too. The rubber on the road.
Mm-hmm. You can tell the difference when you hear them, even if you don't think you do. You would know the difference.
But a whine is more of a like hydraulics, cavitation, air that's moving in fluid, as you're turning a gear through it, and it's just making a whirl, a whine. It's just different.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. What's caught your attention in the automotive world?
Well, as we go through the continued transition, you got a lot of people that are going to get their minds kind of twisted between whether they want to make that jump to electric as they're pushing it pretty hard because they see the advantages of some of the maintenance items, and yet they've got the concern about how they're going to drive. And I've talked to more people recently, just myself, that have been asking more questions about the electric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of hit me this week as more people asked me, well, what do you think about this? And then we got in and we bought a bunch of, and it was almost like blasphemy to some people, but we got 6.6 liter gas. It's an LS or LT series engine, great engine with a 6-speed automatic transmission. And people are using those in street rods to make powerful, internal combustion engine, rumbling exhaust, trucks, street rods, whatever it might happen to be. But these engines were removed from minibuses, Chevy Express van minibuses that are being converted to electric to be used in school systems. And so as I posted some of this on social media, I got some of the expected comments. And they're like, why would you pull a ICE motor out to put electric? And other people were truly intrigued, like, how do they do that?
Right.
And there's a lot of engineers involved. That's how they do that. Or people that have done it and made a company out of it, and they're doing these conversions regularly. Our school system, many of you know I'm actively involved in our school in our small town of Garrettson. I've been the school board president for a number of years. And our business manager applied for some of the grant money that was available for the electric school bus conversion program. And our school received an opportunity for a very large grant. And our superintendent told us about it at the board, and he asked my opinion, and I said, let me get back to you. And so started doing my own research about the electric school buses and found out that there is a number of companies that make these electric school buses. And the typical manufacturers that you remember, you ever get in a school bus and seeing Bluebird?
Bluebird.
They make electric school buses now. You ever see International? They make electric school buses now. And there's also a company called Lion that makes electric school buses also. And so we went ahead and we did the research. We talked to other school districts around the Midwest, was what we were particularly interested in, and Canada that have electric school buses.
Hey?
Yeah, and we learned that from my initial concern that they might not be ready for prime time to where they're at now, we think that they're going to make good route buses for us.
Okay.
For our routes.
Sure.
We don't have long routes. We know how many miles we run. We know the capacity, and we're confident that we can get our routes out of these buses, and it's going to be a big savings for our district.
Can you keep them warm?
They have. This is once again blasphemy to the electric people, but they had to come out with the option of a heater that is run by kerosene or diesel. Or
remember the electric S10s we had here?
Yep.
Were they almost 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Now?
What year were those, Russ? So they were 94s.
And they were from the California Electric Co-op or something, but they
Yep.
all had a diesel. You said they were electric, and I came out and he's full of crap. They say diesel right on the side. They had a thing that said diesel fuel only, but those aren't electric. And I opened the hood and went, this is odd.
Yeah, they're actually from Power Utility down in the southeast. They were Georgia area and stuff like that, and they were using these as meter readers and running around. But that's 1994, I think that was, Russ. But
save an old one for state tournaments.
So that was one of our biggest concerns was, all right, what about this heating system and how much that draws the batteries down? Well, they found out that it wasn't quite ready to say that was going to all be electric and not compromise the usability of the bus. So they've given the option to include a small, whatever BTU heater that is supplemental. And that was a big change, but it's a big game changer and a big difference. So originally we were going to try one, then we were going to try two. And so then at the end of the day, after we did the research, talked to enough districts, we decided, you know what? We've got the opportunity to get this money from the government. We talked to our local electricians, and so we're going with 3 of them in our Garrettson School District. And
cool.
yes, we are keeping internal combustion buses for the long runs, for the activities buses that go out a long ways because the range isn't there, and we can't take that chance if we're sending our football team out to Harriet or wherever it might be for a playoff game. So kind of interesting.
866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Car feeling ill? Don't want to spread it to your wallet? Call the Motor Medics now for free advice.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's go to Ohio and talk to Caleb. Caleb, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Hey, I just had a general question on operation. I am an A&P mechanic, and I was trying to figure out how both of the oxygen system or O2 sensors work before and after the CAT. How they actually, it says they measure oxygen, and I was just wondering, do they just do that by temperature? And the second part of the question, if you remove the catalytic converter, disregarding the emissions legality and all that other stuff, and left everything else in place, how would the car run? And would there be a check engine light?
There's definitely a check engine light when you remove the catalytic converter. Because the car was originally tuned to run with it. So when the first oxygen sensor is switching rich to lean between 0 and 1 volt, typically on most cars, that's going to be crossing over the 500 millivolt portion very rapidly. The downstream one, because we've removed now a lot of the gases out of there by or converting with the converter on there, it's going to switch a lot slower, and the computer knows that. The ECM says, all right, the first one's switching, the downstream one should be switching slower and more steadily because we don't have the combination of gases in there, the poisonous gases coming out for emissions. And if it doesn't see that, it'll say there's a problem, and it's going to give you a catalyst efficiency code, a P0420. So you need a converter in there to do that. And a lot of people have put these little devices in that fool the converter into thinking that, or the computer into thinking that there's a computer, a working converter in there. And then they have the sensor in there is made up of an element which is able to detect. It will react differently and change the voltage depending on how much oxygen content is in the heated air passing by it. But a sensor won't work. Those elements will not react with the air and how much oxygen is present if they're too cool. So they put a heater into them to heat them up faster so the computer can start adjusting the emissions quicker when you first start the car. So that's how that works.
And without the converter in there, you're not going to get the ample back pressure that you need to generate that heat.
That too. If you're building a race car, you could you get a little more efficiency. These converters flow so well now compared to what they did in the 80s and even the 90s that it makes zero difference on a car. You could build a 4,000 horsepower race car with catalytic converters on it, and it'd be just fine if it was tuned for that. So if you were to remove, let's say you wanted to build a race car and you've got a 2000 Camaro, those would be a little bit restrictive. So you take the converters off, you retune the computer to run with the less back pressure. You adjust your fuel and your spark curve and all that to get it to operate properly. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks very much for the call. I like that the surprise ending there, that he just took that.
He wanted to learn a few things.
And he got it.
Yeah, and he wanted to learn a few things. And that's what I think the part of that answer that was probably interesting to a lot of hoodies, because it's interesting to me when I hear it every time, is that they use a small amount of precious materials in those oxygen sensors, just like they do inside the catalytic converter. And so there are some of the companies that buy the catalyst from us that will take the oxygen sensors, but typically the labor doesn't offset the value of the metal there to try to extract it.
And it wears out and dissipates over time as well.
As it works.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's supposed to do, right?
It's sacrificial, yes.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Tom. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Tom, what can we do for you?
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you?
Good.
All right.
I sold my farm to my son, moved into town. I got a 2012 Dodge Ram 1500.
Okay.
And every time we start it, the wife says, "It smells like the barn in here." I went to change the air filter, and there's not one installed in that truck. Someone told me you have to cut the door open, put one in, and the filter comes with a replacement door.
You're talking about a cabin air filter, and yes, you can
Yeah.
you can do that, but I'm concerned that you shouldn't have that smell. A cabin air filter is not going to fix that smell. You probably got some mice in there
Oh, don't tell him that.
that it came in through that
can't-
open vent.
We can't end the show with rodents.
Well, that's what that's what happens when you with when there's no cabin air. When there is a cabin air filter, they chew through it. They'll chew right through it. So you could some people have put wire screens on there because it's one of the easier places for rodents to get into the cars. The other cheaper event than that is if you've got a problem with mice around your vehicle, is go to our partner NHOU at nhoil.com, and they have a product called Mouse Out, which will repel rodents from getting in there in the first place. But once they're in there, you've got to locate the source and remove them. You got to pull that cowl panel off, pull the wipers off, pull the cowl panel off, and you can see down in there and see where that air intake is. And make sure it's clean, that there's nothing in there. You'll probably have to pull your blower motor out from under the right side of the dash, which is pretty easy as well. I always like to say, if you can change a lawnmower spark plug, you can pull that blower out of that model and just pull it out and see if there's any mouse droppings in there, any trash. Could be just leaves. Hay,
Yeah, let's hope for the
stuff
best.
from the barn.
And we've seen too where a nest will get built external, somewhere near the exhaust, and when you fire it up, it gets hot and smells like that smell. Mufflers, stuff packed up above them, or if you've been out in the field and picked up a bunch of weeds and it gets packed up in there. I mean, those are the types of things that cause fires too, but those things can make those sort of smells. But you described that in such a way, I right away was a little nervous about rodents too, with the way he described that.
Maybe it's time to renegotiate the sale of the farm and include the truck in it and just make it a farm truck, and then
I thought you were going to say include the mice.
yeah. Livestock. We didn't count all the livestock. We have to rework this here.
This contract is not right.
That's right. Tom, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. That is the smell issue is an annoyance beyond. I mean, that thing, because
typically the rodent issue will outsmell the nest issue.
Right. So this is, I think there's hope for this one, right?
I'm optimistic. How long has he been in the city? We should have asked him.
Well, and there's no, if someone else smells it.
Are they new residents or old ones?
And it's the whole, well, it's not that bad. You get that conversation going. This isn't great. Thanks very much for the call. That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. Hour 2 is coming up. We'd love to hear from you. 866-594-4150. For Russ Evans, Shannon Nordstrom, I'm Chris Carter. Thanks for listening to this hour of the Under the Hood Show. Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Thanks for joining us under the hood.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter, here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. 866-594-4150. What's caught your attention in the automotive world?
We had a study that just came out. Would you call it a study? Let me see if I got it on my phone here. But Consumer Reports, in conjunction with the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, did a survey. What's one of the questions that we get asked on this show that we oftentimes are like, oh, I don't like that when they ask, what's the best car to buy? Which, it's always such a, I don't know, very subjective thing sometimes, but you just don't know what people like. And the answer is never quite.
The answer is always a Corolla or an Accord, but what's your next part?
Yeah. So what they did is
they didn't ask the mechanics that work on them every day, do they?
I will share this onto our Facebook page when we get a chance here, but the best used cars for teens under $20,000, and this was just a few days ago this came out.
Times have changed, huh?
Yeah, wouldn't you say?
How long ago? It wasn't long ago. It was my son, when he got his license, we were like at the
$3,000.
Yeah.
The calls when I started this show were $2,000, I think.
Or less.
And the first one was, I think, $700.
Well, Chris said, I distinctly remember him on one show where a guy goes, yeah, this is whoever calling in. I've got a Honda Accord I just bought for $500 and it stalls sometimes. So what? It was $500. You remember that, Chris?
Yeah.
You say that kind of stuff to people, and they're like, "No, you're supposed to have guaranteed me that it was to be good." Yeah, come on, we can't do that. But anyway, this story is interesting because it does take into account the safety systems in the vehicles, and as the vehicles have evolved, certain vehicles have got more safety systems on them, and some people would argue and debate that that's good, bad, or otherwise when they start seeing recall after recall on these different things. There was another big old batch they've got on notice now for GM's mid-size sport utilities. Your very popular Enclaves and Traverses, and some of them are starting to see some action probably. And I think what people don't know behind the scenes is that these auto manufacturers are just delaying and taking whatever action they can, because the longer that they don't have to pay a settlement of some sort or replace components, that many more vehicles are retiring out of the network that they don't have to fix. But anyway, this goes into it and talks about safety. Talks about, with teenagers being riskier drivers, that should be a very important thing that you look at. And they do this, quite often. And they leave out the subcompact cars.
Okay.
Anything less than 2,750 pounds, they leave it out.
Okay.
Because they said that just historically, those cars aren't safe.
Well, they're smaller. It's just a matter of physics. Big versus small, that's just the way it's going to be.
So in this particular report, like I said, I'll put this on our Under the Hood Show Facebook page.
And the bigger ones have gotten much, much bigger.
Yeah, and heavier.
Yeah.
Here's the things that they're looking for to be a good choice. Electronic stability control.
Good.
ESC. If you see ESC, electronic stability control. And that became standard on all passenger cars. And we've talked about this on the show in 2012. That became a standard option and was on many more before then. They looked for above average reliability, and they looked at average or better scores for Consumer Reports emergency handling test. They looked at dry braking distances of less than 145 feet from 60 miles an hour. Good ratings in the crashworthiness test of the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, and 4 or 5 stars from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, if it was rated for that. And that is something that they did, and I'll get the results on there because as you go through this, I realize the section that I want to tell you with the results is password protected, and I brought the wrong link up, and I can't tell you that right now. Except for I'll find it, and we'll get that posted out there for you. That was a big tease with no ending to it.
I used to love watching the old road and track, the tests where they'd put the wings on the car with the wheel on the end that were about a foot off the ground, and then they'd go intentionally do that emergency maneuver where you'd turn really hard and it would tip up and catch on the wheel. And I always wondered, well, isn't the car tipping easier because you've got a 15-foot pole sticking out the side of it with a wheel on it that's heavy? You'd think it would do something, but they would do that with a lot of cars and see if they could roll them and tip them up. And
and that's where a lot of that the safety ratings came from.
I found it.
Okay.
Now I'll give you a quick rundown here. I had to jump to an NBC News article that was reporting on the report.
Okay. And
so it was the best choices for used vehicles, small cars. They said that the Mazda 3 sedan or hatchback, 14 through 20, they said that's not a bad choice, apparently. $9,100 they figured for kind of a going price. They had the Toyota Prius on here, 14 through 16. And they had the price at $10,000, and good luck buying one for that.
Yeah,
I mean that's just
or the Mazda. I'm kind of thinking
the Ford C-Max Hybrid from 14 to 16, the Subaru Impreza sedan from 18 to 22.
Budget for head gaskets.
Yeah, and then they got into the midsize cars, and they went on their list. The midsize cars, they had the Subaru Legacy, 13 through 21, built after August 2012. They were that was a big deal, evidently.
Okay.
And they said that at a $7,800 price tag. Mazda 6.
Whoa, $7,800 for any Subaru?
This is a little skewed here, I think.
They are dreaming.
Yeah, Mazda 6, $10,200 from 14 to 18. Subaru Outback, 15 through 18 and 22. They skipped 19 and 20 21 for some reason. They got that down at $12,000. No way. Toyota Prius, 15 to 17. What price do you think they put down on that, Chris?
$13,000.
$14,500.
Okay.
You can't buy one for that.
Maybe there is one that has 240,000 miles and no glass.
And the Volkswagen Passat,
that's a
2017, being very specific, for $14,500.
I'm thinking like we had a customer just bought a 17 and he wants to know how much to put a timing belt in. And he paid $17,000 for it.
The more I read this list, the more I don't know if I want to share it.
Right.
BMW's 3 Series. Everybody goes out and buys one of them. You sense my sarcasm growing?
That is probably a cheaper car because those things drop their value pretty quick.
No, they want 2017 or newer for $16,500.
If you find one of those.
Yeah. You'd buy it. You'd like to have a little road car for, And then we get into the large car segment, the last one, Toyota Avalon, 15 or newer for $14,600. Where are you going to buy one of them?
All right.
Hyundai Genesis 2016
Leave the
for
prices off.
$18,000.
Leave the prices off where it sounds
that was their
useless.
Those were their used vehicles.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Kenny in Minnesota. Kenny, you're on the End of the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Hi. Got a problem that myself and the mechanics haven't not been able to figure out yet. I have a 2016 Ford Transit cargo van. It has 3.7 V6 in it. And just about every day when I go out in the morning to turn the key and start it, it starts right up. But on occasion, all it does is turn over. It does not start. And then go to the garage, and they say, okay, we'll take a look at it. They go out, try to start it. It starts right up.
Of course.
This has happened several times, 3, 4, maybe 5 times over the last couple of years.
And it's never went down while they have it in captivity.
Well, most recently now I had it at the Ford dealer, and that's where I've been bringing it to the Ford dealer because that's a little more special or particular. But they, the first time they tried it, did not start. They went to get the pusher in the garage, and then of course it started.
Oh boy!
So I don't really know where to go with it actually.
Well, until it actually acts up continuously, so they can see it act up, diagnose the problem, replicate it, and fix it, and then verify it's not doing it any longer. Nobody's going to be able to fix this thing. And that's just the way car repair has become. I mean, it's always been that way, but now there's so many electronic things that can really get in there. It used to be you could look and say, okay, there's a carburetor on this car, and it has gas in it. There's spark coming out of the spark plug. We're good to go. If one of those is lost, that's the problem. But now, electronically, it could be any number of things. You know, I was working on a Volkswagen the other day, and it had 9 solenoids in the transmission, and it was only doing things here and there. And which one is it? And it's got to do it all the time, right? I have no idea. You know, it says random in it. Well, what's random mean? Well, one of the things is acting weird when it's not supposed to. And that makes it really hard when it does it so little and you bring it in. And then, you know, we'll have customers that, so I had one, as an example, came in, and he had taken it to a dealership. The dealership told him the entire AC system needed to be replaced. Everything for about $4,000. Compressor, condenser, lines, evaporator. I mean, everything. And I thought, okay, so, you know, our lead tech says, well, let's start with an evacuation and recharge to see what's going on. So we evacuate it, recharge it, and it works perfectly. I said, let's drive it for a while and see what it does. Drives it 6 days. Still working perfectly. So we know for a fact the entire system doesn't need to be replaced, but something may be wrong somewhere if it quit. So after 6 days, it just was working perfectly and then just shut off and didn't work. Okay, well, what's wrong with it? We got to diagnose it, but we know it's not everything. But finding it now, you bring it back, and all of a sudden everything's working again. Well, now that it's all working, I'm not going to guess. Now, if we just said, let's replace every component on it, maybe we'll hit the one that's bad. Same way with yours. We could replace everything in the fuel system, everything in the ignition system, but we still may not hit it if it's something external, like an ignition switch or something. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be one of those where you could just hope for the best that it completely quits, and then they can find it, and the part that makes it completely quit is the problem that was occurring before.
Have them check the electrical connection by the firewall. There is... I had somebody that ran across this once, and there was a drain there that was leaking water on the electrical connection on the firewall, causing an intermittent problem. It was a company that I knew.
On a Transit Connect?
Yes. Something to check.
That's new to me. I like that one, though.
Kenny, thanks very much for the call. Sorry we can't really
pinpoint
it any. Yeah, it's just going to be.
They've had it in the shop, and they've already worked on it, so
866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Get your planner out right now and schedule your next radio appointment with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. Let's go to Idaho and talk to Scott. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Scott, what can we do for you?
Yes, I have a Kia Forte 2018. And since I bought it, you hit a railroad track, a manhole, a pothole, really. From about 35 on up is when you really notice it. And every time you hit a bump, that back end catches free, and it feels like it's going to come around to your front. When you get on the freeway in higher speeds, it's really bad. Just like it's floating around. During the winter, if you hit a patch of ice, it's white knuckle time. I took it into Kia because it was a warranty thing, and they only found one bad hub. Like, this is not it. Keeps doing it. I had brand new tires on there, dead alignment. They says, we can't find anything wrong. Everything's within spec. But the front driver's side is just a little off, like you got in an accident, but everything seems straight and it lines up. I put Michelin tires on this time. It demolished it, but it's still there no matter what.
Sometimes tires can cause that. We've had that happen before, but more often than not, it's an alignment issue doing that. When the suspension moves up and down, the tire angle changes depending on how they've got it set, and it will do that. And if it's off enough, even just hitting a loose spot in the road or trying to drive it down a gravel road, it'll get all over the place. And that's an alignment thing, and it may be that when you go to an alignment store, an alignment tech doesn't have to be smart if he can turn a couple wrenches. I mean, a lot of them are genius smart, but there's many of them that really aren't. They
know how to run the machine.
Yeah, they can put it on there. They push a button and it says connect the heads to the wheels, and you do that. Roll the car forward and backwards. You do that. Then it says, see this mark? It's in the red. Loosen this bolt, move the wheel this far until it says green, and then tighten it up. So it's pretty basic. It can be along the line of just a person that is entry level, maybe changing oil, nothing else. But it can be very sophisticated. You can have the guy that pulls it onto the machine, and he looks at the number and says, that's in the green, but I don't like those numbers. The camber, the caster, they're just not where I'd like to see them to make this car stay centered driving down the road. They would understand that, at those numbers, a car would be more apt to pull to one side if it had a lot of weight put in the back of it or in the front of it, or if it hit bumps, it would do some weird things. Or just because it's this model car, this is what normally happens, and we're going to adjust this thing so the rear is in the red, but it's the calibration of the machine they're using to do it, because somebody had to program in at what numbers the system is red, yellow, and green. And so what I'd like to see would be, if I had this car with this problem, I'd be going to an alignment shop that has the old guy standing in the alignment pit that can work on the car and do it by hand. He's got a hand gauge. He looks at it, or even an electronic one where he's looking at it and says, this is the number I'd like to see. And when you walk in, you say, Bob, when I hit a bump, the back end gets squirrely. And he looks at it and says, yeah, everything's tight. Everything looks good. Good quality tire on here. I like this brand. I like this model on this car. But you know what? These numbers are off in what I like to see. I'm going to change them. I'm going to go drive it and see what it does. Hey, it works perfect now. That's the kind of alignment tech that I like to see.
And the difference can be very small. I've had that where there's a guy that I've brought my car to, and he looked at it and said, "Boy, they're pretty close." I mean, I adjusted it just a tiny bit. I don't know if I think they were pretty close on the alignment, and it fixed everything because he just did it.
Was that on the Beetle?
Yes, it was.
Because those were awful. I mean, I've done a better job on those with the tape measure and adjusting them than some of the new electronic machines have, because I think maybe they were off.
Does that help you out there, Scott?
Yeah, I talked to a few alignment shops, and they're saying there's nothing they can adjust in the back, considering it's a solid axle.
No. Yeah, well, that would be depending on where you're talking to, because I know a couple of alignment shops.
They will tweak an axle if they have to.
Superman will grab that axle and they'll bend it where they need it to be to conform to their issues.
But the answer they gave is true.
It is true.
We can't do anything with the back.
If it's a big box store alignment shop, they do not typically have things that can adjust that. There's no bolts to loosen up to adjust that. But a frame and alignment shop will commonly bend things to conform to their needs. That's how they adjust a lot of trailers. There are zero adjustments, but if that thing's dog tracking going down the road, they'll just grab it and then they'll pull it and go, no, it's off the other way. Yep, now we're good.
So where does Scott go?
Something that says frame and alignment, typically. If that's in the title, they can usually do it.
Or we've said this before on the show, if they're aligning medium duty and heavy duty trucks, but then they have a side bay where they do cars and pickups also, that's where you need to go.
Or ask those guys.
Ask those guys where to go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, in the town that you're in, for sure.
Scott, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Prepare to learn something. You're going under the hood.
866-594-4150. Don't forget, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and join the Hoodie Fan Club at underthehoodshow.com, which we use just to get your size and address so we can mail you a hoodie.
Like Barb Fillin. Congratulations from us here at Under the Hood and our friends over at Universal Technical Institute, uti.edu. Check them out today.
866-594-4150. Let's go to Arizona and talk to Jesse. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Jesse, what can we do for you?
Oh, yeah. My check engine light came out on my 2004 GMC Sierra 1500. It's a 5.3 liter. It says it has a PO 171. It says a System 2 Lean Bank 1. So it has all kinds of options, and I've heard all kinds of opinions, but what would be the best way to figure out that leak? Or because I've changed the fuel pump on it twice, and I changed all the tubing that the gas goes through to the tank. I changed that like a couple of years ago, and what do you think it might be? I mean, the easiest thing for me to figure out, or what do I need to do?
I'm kind of curious, Jesse, being you're in Arizona, right?
Yes,
Those lines that you replaced, why did you replace them? Because I wouldn't think you'd have a corrosion problem down there.
No, I don't know. The mechanic that did it, he said that it would be the best thing to do. so I changed all that down there, and then he even had to take the pump off again, drop the gas tank, and put a new seal on it for the fuel pump goes into, snaps onto the tank. He had to change that. He had to put a new gasket on there.
Russ is dying to say something, but I want to finish my thought on the fuel lines.
That's a different code. So you probably had two codes to begin with, probably like a PO 445 or something, an emissions code, small leak. So he replaced the. I'm just guessing by what you're saying. He may have replaced some lines because of a leak, and then replaced the seal because of a leak, which would be unrelated to this other issue,
okay.
But that's probably what that was. So he probably did a good job and got that code fixed, and now that's gone.
I just want to go back, though. I mean, when you say he replaced the lines, that's Russ, you're bringing up the exact point. Was like the fuel lines like from the engine back to the fuel tank, or just short lines that were part of the
sell
Senior?
a lot of these.
Yes.
So yes,
yeah,
what?
Just the short lines on top of the gas tank.
Okay, all right.
Those.
I was getting nervous for a second because somebody, if they would have taken you down that road, I was going to advise you to find a different mechanic quickly.
But this lean code, so how we diagnose it, we'll hook a scanner up to it and we'll watch. And if it's super lean, like let's say the bank one sensor is going to be on the side with the number one spark plug, driver's side. So when we look at this and see that that side is lean, if the front sensor is lean, but the rear sensor is not, let's say the front one's down around 1 millivolt, which is really low, and it stays there all the time, but the back sensor, the downstream behind the converter, is switching and it's higher, I know it's not that lean, and I know the sensor's got a problem. But if both of them are that lean on that side, now I got to really dig in and start looking at things like, do I have a vacuum leak? Do I have an injector that's not working? A cylinder that's dead? What's going on? I got to figure out what's going on with this system there. If both sides are off, but it's not running lean, I could have a mass airflow system going on. But if it's just one side and it's just upstream, the sensor itself failing is more likely. And like we discussed earlier on the show, we talked about sensors being sacrificial, whereas they wear a little bit every minute that they run, and eventually they need to be replaced. You'll see around 100,000 miles on average on these sensors on these vehicles. In fact, we just put 2 on an 04 yesterday because they were worn out. They just couldn't switch, and it turned into a, switching slow routine, and we replaced them, and they came right back up, and you'll actually pick up some fuel mileage when they can switch like they're supposed to.
Does that help you out there, Jesse?
Yeah, it sounds. I'll have to take it to a really good mechanic then.
Somebody that's familiar with fuel systems like that knows how to read the data. Like we've said, we were talking about alignments, and you can have the guy that reads the codes and can replace the parts and has a pretty good knowledge of it. But then you can also have the person that can read the data and not know there's a code in the system and say, because of the data I'm seeing coming in, these are the codes you will have just based on the readings I'm getting without even looking at a check engine light or any codes, which is more difficult. That's where you get into the advanced tech, and it has to be somebody that's been doing it for a while that knows what to look for.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's talk to Brian. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Brian, what can we do for you?
Well, I've called with that 2001 Buick that's not starting before. Put in a different map sensor, and then we reset the codes, and then it would crank and not start again. Then it gave us a code of B1009, and I think it was B2734 that was the current codes. Have any idea what's still going wrong with that car? You clear the code off, and then it starts and runs. Then it'll be fine for a while, and then it'll die, and then it doesn't want to start.
Yeah, this is I think this is the third time you called, and each time we're even a little more puzzled because this is a car that typically people can figure out pretty quick as far as like mechanics and different things.
And don't have these issues. Those are body codes. B is a body code. C is a chassis code. P is an engine code. Body means in body computer, body control module. And that is where you've got a the vehicle anti-theft system, the VATS security in that as well. I mean, you get some things going on in there that if you've got B codes coming up and you're clearing them and the car's starting, I'm going to bet it's in the anti-theft system.
Because in the earlier call, if I remember correctly, we told you that we didn't know of, on that model, a code that would kill the car from an engine code. From an engine, if I remember correctly.
And the body codes won't kill the engine either. They should not.
Typically,
but
they
if
won't.
it's not operating properly, who knows what it's doing? Because they call it we called about the vehicle the failure effects management mode last week that Ford uses, and it says if you have this code, you do this. Typically, it's turn on the light, and in some of the worst cases, it's turn on the light, and the next time you turn it off, don't let the car restart because this is a dangerous situation for the car or the driver. Well, it might be going into a mode which is wrong, and it's telling it, shut off. Something has failed in there, and it's just killing the system. But it could even be a body control module that's doing that. If you've got,
I guess Russ, yeah, that's what I was going to say. What, if I remember right, Brian, you had another car you were swapping parts with too, correct? Or was that somebody else?
No, that was somebody else. I went to a salvage yard and got that different map sensor because I didn't want to buy a new one to make, and then not have it be the wrong part.
Yeah, that's right. You went to a U-Pull or something, got a sensor there. But now, this car, if you're not able to figure that out, but I was just going to say, Russ, what would be your approach? Yours or Jake's, or you get in that car, what's the approach? Once again, random stopping.
Yeah, that's.
Or is it dead right now?
Well, I don't know. I haven't messed with that. The mechanic I go to, he knows somebody there in town that will come out and they can kind of eliminate that anti-theft device. That he's got some sort of computer that can override that computer and put it to where you don't need that chip key and all that stuff. Is it worth doing that, or is it, because I guess he's going to charge me about as much, because if I take it to a dealer and they have to pull that tumbler out and get that anti-theft code thing back onto that tumbler, then program a new key, that's going to cost me about the same amount of money, or maybe even a little more.
There's not a bypass for the unit. There is a bypass for the key. So if you've got a problem in your ignition switch, they'll cut the wires under the dash and they will solder in a resistor to simulate the key always being in there, and that'll fix that portion. But if there's a problem with the anti-theft module itself, you can't buy an anti-theft module anymore for those cars that I know of. We've always picked up a used one, and many cars use the same anti-theft module, many different models. They were all the same in that VATS vehicle anti-theft system unit. So, yeah, that's a great idea to get. If you own a car and it's got a chip in the key you can see, get that bypassed right away, because those little hair-thin wires that go up to the switch break at
Which
some
is the
point.
same thing they did when they put in remote starts. They had a bypass module they would use for remote starting systems, in that model to make your car.
Start with that. Get that done, and then they'll need to go
But
through
shouldn't
and see
he
what's
have
else.
a very clear theft symbol on his dash when it's not starting?
Oh, definitely.
Do you have that?
Well, it has that light says security, but
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't
That would-
remember if that's on or off.
Look at that, because that would be a huge clue.
If it's on when you turn that key, then and it stays on, it's
And
got
the
a
car
problem.
won't start. That's
that
That's a huge clue.
That's the starting point, at least.
Yep.
Yeah.
You need to eliminate that and
yeah.
move down the line and look at the other. It's going to take time in a shop.
Brian, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Be sure to visit our website for news, contests, and previous shows at underthehoodshow.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get back under the hood with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's talk to Gary in Michigan. Gary, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Hey, good morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Fantastic,
Great.
Gary.
Good. I'm the guy that called in with the 59 El Camino the other day with the rear sway bar versus the adjustable shocks. And I just want to, first of all, tell you thank you so much for your advice. Put the rear sway bar on. that son of a gun's cornering like it never has. I really appreciate your help on that.
That is good to
fantastic.
hear.
Yeah.
And I've got a vision of you smiling as you're cornering.
Quickly.
Got another quick question about a completely different automobile, completely different area for it. Got a 2011 Mustang V6 convertible. It's a nice little aluminum V8, the 3.7. It's got 305 horsepower. Runs better than my '69 GTO ever did. But I've got a friend of mine that suggested I should put a tuner on it, just a tuner chip. And he said he's used them in a variety of cars, loves them. Looked at their website. They said, yeah, we can put up to 60 more horsepower in that little V6 and get an extra five miles to the gallon over the thing. I'm just wondering, I've never used one. What's the downside of using one of these things? Can it hurt the motor? Can it actually screw things up? It runs great today.
On the front page of that website, was there a picture of a genie?
Yeah.
In a bottle?
The downside would be disappointment from it not doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah,
for
that's
$700.
unreasonable expectations, I think, without other tuning done to the car.
Based on
our experience.
Yeah, we've sold them.
I thought that too. I was in marketing for 40 years, and I'm going, nah, that doesn't sound too reasonable.
Yeah, so I would say if you told me that the car could get up to 1 mile per gallon better, or I'd say if it says up to 2 miles per gallon better, and let's say up to 15 horsepower increase.
Plausible.
And it depends on the fuel you're using. Yeah, so I've got a Bully Dog tuner in an 04 Tahoe, and I get about 2 miles per gallon better with it because I use this tuner. The reason I get 2 miles per gallon better with it is because I can only use high octane fuel in it. If I don't, it will detonate. I can hear it rattling, pinging as I drive it. It says, warning, must use 91 octane or better fuel. So that's in there too. Now, if the manufacturers knew, if they had higher octane fuel, if they had 95 ROM fuel to run in everything, it'd be a game changer. They should just mandate it, whether it's by ethanol or gasoline, just mandate it, and then they could tune all these cars differently, and right out of the factory, they could change it. They could change the emissions. They would go down. They could change the miles per gallon, the power. All of it would be so much better. I don't think we'd be seeing as many of these little turbo engines exploding, the little 1 liters and things they make, because they wouldn't detonate, and therefore they wouldn't detonate. They're
Interesting.
yeah, but we don't have a lot of the fuel you're putting in is 87 octane, and when you put that in and you expect the tuner to bring up the nope. Go find the website for that tuner, look it up, look at the specs and what they're expecting. I'll bet they'll say standard tune, they're probably expecting an 89 octane minimum, and for their performance tune to get better fuel economy, probably 91 to 93. So
yeah, and I think 93 is maybe as best we get in Michigan. We get the 10% ethanol. We don't have any of the different ratings that you guys get over there. We're kind of limited over here. So.
Where are you at in Michigan?
Southwest.
Southwest. Okay, so over Kalamazoo area, that area, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, 93 is going to be your premium there.
Is there anything I can do that I can get an extra
miles per gallon
octane in there? I mean, if I'm putting
you buy the higher octane, and 93 would be fine. That's going to be a premium with ethanol if it's 93. 92 is probably going to be their regular premium, maybe even 91. But you got to weigh the cost. I mean, you could run. A lot of people. We can't say legally you can do it, but a lot of people run E30, which is going to get that above the 93.
And he said
octane.
he may not have that where he's at.
Right, and so people do that with the performance cars around this area and other places to get that. But yeah, where you're at, you could only get so much, and then you got to look at the cost, because if you could buy regular premium fuel or race gas, you got to offset the cost of that versus the tuner and how much you're actually going to save and things like that.
I have a hard time believing that with any consistency and pleasure to you, you're going to get what you expect that you'll notice with that V6 Mustang tune. I think if you put the tune on and you sound like a person that's very particular about your things, and you paid attention to how you were driving it because you put the tune on there, and I've talked about this for 30 years, but people will subconsciously drive differently to try to get the results that they would because they're too embarrassed to tell their friends that they bought something that didn't work.
Right.
And so,
Is this an EcoBoost Mustang turbo?
no.
No.
It's a normally aspirated.
It's a 3.7.
You're not. I just don't see it unless I'm totally under a rock for what you can do with a 3.7 V6 Mustang for performance.
An EcoBoost, that's a whole different story. You tune one of those and up the octane slightly, and you can make a difference because they're changing turbo pressures, they're changing the fuel, all of that.
But this is a port injected V6.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that again because no.
Gary, thanks very much for the
Just
call.
enjoy the convertible, and if you want more power, buy a V8.
Yeah, let me just say, enjoy the convertible while you can.
Yeah.
Don't have it in.
Go smile and turn corners hard in your El Camino.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Dale. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Dale, what can we do for you?
I just bought a different vehicle for my wife. It's a 2011 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It does not have a remote start. Now, the guy that we bought it from says that you can go online and buy a thing for like $100 that you just unplug underneath your dash and plug this in, and then your remote entry, you press it 3 times instead of 1 time, and it works like a starter then. You ever hear of such a thing?
Yeah, it's not $100 though.
Okay.
Is he saying that's a factory thing?
No, our friends over at Audio Playground sell a remote starter, and the remote starters now you buy the remote starter, and they're like a module assembly. So here you get the starter, and then you get an antenna kit, and your antenna kit determines whether it's a one-way remote where you just start it and you don't know if it's running or not, a 2-way remote where it may make the remote beep, or a fully functional with the display that tells the temperature of the interior of the car and all that kind of stuff. But you can also get that unit without remotes at all, and you can set it for lock pulse, hit the lock button 3 times, and it starts the engine. Hit it 3 more times, it shuts the engine off. So you don't need to buy the remotes because the remotes can add a significant cost to the starter. So if you've got, let's say, I want to say it's more like a $250 remote, because you got to buy, some might have a bypass module, some not, but let's say you spent $250 for a starter that uses the lock factory 3 times option versus $550 for one that's really fancy with the nice remotes.
And you might have to require a subscription.
Yeah.
For the other one, the more expensive one.
Yeah.
Or the one he's talking about, you probably can do that without a subscription, correct?
Right. Or you could even just put the drone mobile type unit in, which is all on your phone. But you're going to find with the Cherokee, there's not a lot of range for your remote, and you're going to be in a mall or even in a restaurant. You can see your car on the far end of the parking lot, but your factory remote's not going to unlock it. Practice now. Take your factory remote when you get in a place where you think, if it was winter right now and I wanted to start this, I can see my car. I'm in the theater. Will my lights flash when I hit the lock button on my remote from where I'm at? If they don't, your car will never start from that distance. So if you say, no, I wish I could start it right now or turn the air on and it's not working, I'm not close enough, it's not going to do that with the remote, and you're going to be disappointed in the wintertime when you want to use it. So at that point, make your decision.
I would recommend budgeting for just based on the experience, budgeting for the higher dollar system with the feedback and the app and the subscription. It's just so nice.
And in Dale's case, in the guy's defense, in 2011, 12, it might have been $100. I know that when the first remote start I got was the medium level, and it was like $250, and the high level was $400. And that's just not the case anymore. Just in that many years, the remotes have gotten that much different, that much better, and the prices have gone up accordingly, as has the price of everything.
Everything.
Yeah. So,
and I don't think there's any factory accessory we're forgetting about that would do the same sort of thing. That almost has to be what he was talking about. Did we help you out there?
Okay. Yeah, he said he did it on a Plymouth van several years ago.
That's common on those. They had an option for those, and they weren't as expensive as other ones.
Yeah, but so it is, there might be that cheaper option. It's just not
You
as
could
cheap. as
crawl
it-
the internet a little bit, make sure we're not forgetting something, but otherwise get a hold of a quality remote start shop that does a lot of them on the installs. Like here in Sioux Falls, we use Audio Playground, but that's where you need to check.
Dale, thanks very much for the call. This is the after show of the Under the Hood Show. Welcome to it. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Texas and talk to Sam. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Sam, what can we do for you?
Hey, I got, my friend, he has a 2011 Kia Sorento 2.4 liter, the 4 cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And it has he said that his girlfriend took it to the store, turned it off, and when she came back out, it didn't start no more. I changed spark plugs. I want to say that it's the cold air intake, but it wants to turn on, like it cranks and it really want to start, but something's stopping it from starting.
Have you been able to check fuel pressure on this yet?
Yeah, I took the injection out. It's kicking fuel out of it, but I'm thinking it has a because I've watched like 300. I mean, I've listened to 300 shows of y'all.
That's awesome.
And
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it smells like gas, so I'm thinking it's flooded.
Well, if it smells like gas when you're cranking it, you check this, see if it's got spark. It may not have spark or have it all the time. We've had some crankshaft sensors that have failed on these vehicles, causing this issue of a no start where you just shut it off and then it wouldn't restart. In the worst case, though, on a Sorento, it's possible that when key was shut off and the tensioner for the timing chains dropped back and you went to start it, that it jumped timing. And then it's...
That's what I thought too, and I was telling him that, but he said I want to say is that too, because I was thinking about it, but I didn't want to go and do all that right now.
What's the codes say? Did you read the codes or have you been able to?
There's no codes. The check engine light don't come on or nothing. I had bought some spark plugs, and it cranks and it wants to turn on. Like it cranks and it gets to the part where it go faster, but it just won't cut on.
Oh boy, if you're cranking it and it sounds faster than it should, if it sounds like it doesn't have any spark plugs in it, that's usually an indication that it's got some bent valves because it's out of time. Or it's just out of time.
I'm thinking it's got the 4-cylinder leak. It had oil on the spark plug when I pulled it out.
Well, that's not unusual. You can have a valve cover gasket that can leak and cause that. You know, the oil in the plug area.
Yeah, pull them all out and do a compression test and see what it looks like. They should be even all the way across. Whatever that number is, they should be, if it's 140, they should all be about 140. If they're 140, 140, 140, 70, yeah, that's bad.
And or you can just do a leak down test where you push shop air into the cylinders at top dead center, and if they don't seal, and you can tell that there's air blowing out the intake or air blowing out the exhaust, you can then find out if there's a problem with a intake valve, exhaust valve, piston, depending on where the air blows through, if you do have one of those cylinders that's not building up pressure at top dead center. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, somebody told him that they think he's losing compression too on the engine, but it sounds like it wants to crank real good, so I'm not sure right there.
Yeah, that I do get nervous. Russ said it. You start spinning fast. Yes, you can flood a car out. We've seen injectors have problems and flood a car out, and they'll spin like crazy, and you get the cylinders dried down, take the plugs out, figure out why it's flooding with that injector, and they're okay. But just don't spend a lot more energy if it's turning fast until you determine if you have even compression in each cylinder.
Sam, thanks very much for the call. And thanks for listening to all those. I've only been here for 2 hours today, and I'm about good, I'm ready. Ready to see what else is.
I think everybody knows there's a weekend coming.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really close.
Hey, we got to get some calls in.
Yeah, it's really close.
Let's take another one on the after show. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Travis. You're on the Under the Hood show. Travis, what can we do for you?
Hey, guys. Chris, I'm sorry you get bored with 2 hours. I can listen to 2 hours every week and never get bored.
Well, we appreciate that.
This is a call for Russ. I've got a 27 Model T sedan that I just bought it. Somebody's converted it to a distributor at some point, and the distributor is just plumb wore out. Bushings are shot, whatever, the rotor wobbles around, and so I can't get it to run well consistently. Just curious what your thoughts are, if I should buy a Texas T distributor and go and stay with a distributor, or if you think coils are better. I was just curious your opinion.
Well, I like the old timer and the roller on the front of it. There's nothing like the way it was originally designed. It's old enough. It's not like we're taking a points distributor out of a 70 Chevelle and dropping in an HEI to make it actually work better. The factory roller under that timer cover in the front and magneto coils are way more powerful running that factory magneto than a distributor and coil will ever be. I mean, your voltage is way higher and the motor will run way better. But is the magneto in the car any good? Because if that magneto is no good, you got to pull the motor out, take everything apart, and put a new ring on it, because it's just not going to generate. So to do that, the first thing you do is get yourself a voltmeter and you check your voltage and make sure you actually have that the magneto with that point there on top of the engine is generating a lot of voltage. Or, you could have somebody you don't like hold their finger on it while you wind her up. But it should generate voltage, AC voltage.
That's supposed to be like 30 volts AC coming out of there. Is that right?
Oh yeah, it'll light you up really good if you touch it. But it'll vary with your RPM. But if you don't have good AC coming out of there, it'll never power those magneto the coils. And if you're running them on battery, it'll run okay, but it's not going to run near as well as it will with the boost you get out of the coil itself with that thing spinning. So that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to put a set of regular coils in it. Now, if you want to go cheaper, they get a ton of money for that distributor, but a distributor and a coil, that would work. At that point, I'd want to be converting it over to 12 volts so you can run a higher voltage, run a 12-volt coil on it, run your distributor. Then everything could be converted to 12 volts. But a distributor would be fine. I mean, it would work with the mechanical advance on it. But I still run mine with the old school original timer roller. It's just rolling around and touching a point every time it goes around and telling that coil to buzz, and it doesn't just fire it with one little quick spark like you got out of the distributor. It starts buzzing and fires from beginning to the end of that stroke of the cylinder. It's not just lighting at the top of the cylinder. It lights it at the top, but then it continues to buzz on for quite a ways, halfway down. If it lights up and it's on a power stroke, halfway down, it's still buzzing and burning. And those things run rich enough as it is. As Chris calls it, he says it's polar bears per hour it runs. So,
yeah. Does that help you out there, Travis?
It does. I appreciate your opinion.
Thanks very much for the call.
PBPH,
Thanks,
polar bears per hour.
I like it. That's a good, we should start marketing PBPH. I have an idea. I want to get your guys' take. We recently, in between school year and summer internship, we were moving my daughter and moving stuff around, and I found the old inverter that we used to use in the car for VCR or DVD player.
Important accessory for a long time before
Yeah.
the cars started to put them
inverter.
in.
Yeah.
For your Betamax?
Yeah. So here's my question. We have a vehicle that the power port stays active. You have to remember to unplug if you're going to let the car sit for any amount of time.
You mean your 115 volt stays active?
Yeah, you have to remember to
I thought they all shut
unplug the lighter. Okay?
Oh, the lighter stays active.
The lighter stays active. So if you leave something plugged in, it will stay plugged in even when you're out of the car. The little light stays on. So Here's my idea. I plug the inverter in.
Put a battery tender on.
Put a battery tender on it. And it's a perpetual motion machine. It solves all of my
Until it's
problems.
perpetually dead.
Will that work? And why not?
Input of the charger is going to be higher than the output of the charger.
For perpetual motion to work,
Mm-hmm.
you need
No, we just opened this
more
can of worms. Here we go.
I was just kidding about
equal
that part.
to or more out than what is going in, and that just doesn't work.
All right.
Except for a heat pump, like on a house where you put less energy in to get more energy out. And I've always been curious about when they're doing that, why can't we convert that energy back into something that goes in? Because you do get more out than you get in.
And that's what electric cars use essentially, right? Is a heat pump situation.
Oh, for the heating
Yeah.
and air conditioning. Yeah, but we're talking about for power. But at some point, they will find something. But it almost have to be organic and alive to get more out than you put in.
And on today's news, they're making another trip to the moon.
Yeah.
They're going to this planet. They're looking for stuff.
Oh, when
They're looking for stuff.
Right now we've talked about this with your son, Oscar, Chris, many times. It's like, yeah, right now we're about a 6-month trip to get to Mars. But if Elon Musk gets up there and finds the old, unobtainium, if he finds a rock up there that does that, I guarantee you within 5 years, that 6-month trip is going to turn into a 2-week trip.
It's funny you mentioned that. Today is the anniversary of the first SpaceX docking with the International Space Station. Do you know when that was? What year? Shannon, what year do you think?
No idea. 2007.
I think it was 2002.
2002 is when SpaceX was founded. 2012 was the first docking with
Was
the
it
International
12?
Space Station. I would have said 2019, and I would have maybe moved it back to 17 just because I don't have a sense of time. But yeah, it was 11 years ago.
How long has it been since he dumped his first Roadster into space? Was that 5-6 years ago?
That's a good question. I don't
Still
know.
up there cruising around.
Yeah.
Starman's driving.
Can you still track it? Is it still?
Yeah.
They used to have a.
Yeah.
You could.
I
made
think
some
that's
orbits.
been a lot more years than 5.
You think so?
You think so?
Google that
I'm
one, would you,
gonna-
Chris?
It is amazing how I can't keep track.
Perception of that
Yeah.
time. I'm going to guess that's been 10 years ago because those Tesla Roadsters were.
Well, it was after. It was his
well,
own personal
yeah.
car.
I know, but still.
2008.
No way. That's not when the Roadster was dumped
Oh,
into
I'm sorry.
space.
That's when the Tesla Roadster was. Okay, sorry.
It's like we're really off.
That was when the Tesla Roadster was launched. I left off into space accidentally.
It's an important detail on your search.
Yeah. But it's fair. 2018. February
18.
6th, 2018. 5 years.
5 years. I find it interesting watching the space stuff and this last rocket that he launched, Starship. That thing is it's massive. And if you didn't see it, you don't care about that stuff. Imagine something so massive that it completely disintegrated a concrete pad underneath it, which is like, 50 feet thick or something. Just, there was a pile of dust and dirt underneath it. It was just gone. It just huge. The pounds of thrust coming out of that per engine were insane. I mean, it's basically.
And they didn't even light all the engines.
Yeah, because some of them didn't work, but
Yeah.
it's got enough thrust basically to lift the Empire State Building into space. It was, we're talking
Wow.
massive
That
amounts.
puts a perspective on it.
It may not be quite that much, but nearly that much. I don't know how many, because you got to go. You need a pound to lift a pound, but it has a lot. It can carry, if you're putting people in, it's like over 100 people that it'll carry, plus the cargo at a time, depending on the configuration of Starship and these things.
But astronauts are generally in good shape.
Yeah, so they're
It's not
light,
100
right?
regular people. I'm kidding.
They're neat. I mean, they land the Starship when they land the top part on the moon.
Chris-
It's got an elevator in it. You
Chris,
put your cars in it.
Get in the rocket. Sorry, the last 6 people in line, you guys can't get on. That's what they do at airplane. They've done that at airports.
You get in the Starship and like,
Chris-
buzzer goes off.
Like an elevator.
Like
when
an
you got
elevator.
Too many people.
Oh, no.
Chris, could you come to the front desk of the airport? Yeah, hop on this scale, buddy. I'll just drive.
So is there another launch coming up?
There is. There is, but that just caught my eye. I think the next one is a Falcon 9.
Yeah, they're working on rebuilding the launch pad and continuing to build more of those rockets, but it exploded. They detonated it, so it wasn't like that.
They
fell
had an
down.
unscheduled disassembly.
It got out of control.
Oh yeah,
and then they set the self-destruct off because they didn't want it to head straight back down at the same speed it's going up. But
part I got.
They're like, hey, it's a success. It blew up, and everybody else is going, oh, really? But then it's like, remember all those rockets you laughed about because they'll never land on a platform, and then they'll never land. Oh, they'll never land on a ship bouncing up and down 30 feet waves. And now it's like, oh, they do it all the time. But do they go back and say, yeah, we were wrong? They did it? No, it's happening.
Yeah, that whole term unscheduled disassembly was just awesome.
In another car story, I received a couple weeks ago my 4th and final disbursement check for some lawsuit, some class action. I think it was one of the 7 airbag recalls that I've had.
What'd you get?
I think it was like 80. No, it was like $80. And it was the 4th check, and it said this was the final disbursement. I think it was around $80.
So you've gotten 4 $80 checks?
I think they were not the same amount. Frankly, I don't remember any of them. My wife remembered getting them, and she knew that it was not the same amount as last time.
Just launched another airbag recall on the Acadia Traverse Enclave. That model.
Airbag recall, and then there's another one for safety point connections where you connect your safety seats.
I've got that on mine. That the rear seat, they want you to check and inspect it. So I checked it and inspected it myself. So hopefully there's nobody in that back seat and it rolls over and breaks and they get killed because then they'll say, you didn't do the recall. Well, nobody's ever in that back seat. And I inspected it and it's right. But they want, when you bring it in, they will automatically do other things that are, that I don't want them to touch.
Track us?
No, they do. They'll mess with other things you don't. Sometimes it's like your computer. Do you want the upgrade done to your? Don't do the Windows update,
right? Because
it's going to change. But it always worked. Well, yeah, it doesn't work with the new update. We'll put it back. I can't. It's the way it is. What?
But it worked.
Why now it doesn't. So don't mess with it. Yeah. But yeah, you need those safety recalls done, Chris.
What? Why?
Every time.
What are you talking about? This has nothing to do with that.
Do you remember? It killed a 28-year-old Massachusetts man. I better get that axle recall checked. Was yours bad or not on your Windstar?
No.
It was good?
It was fine, yeah.
So it turned out fine. But I remember when that guy got killed, you said, yeah, maybe I should just get it checked.
Mm-hmm.
How many other recalls did you have at that time on that vehicle that were free to do? Like 2?
It's not important.
3?
The
6?
The airbag one, though. 8. I have had it. I'm on the 3rd recall on one of them of the same thing, but they still didn't they weren't able to ever replace it the second time. So now I don't know what I
am thoroughly disgusted that all manufacturers can't find airbag and that the airbag companies can't make a foolproof 100% not going to kill you when it goes off airbag. I mean, the manufacturers either start building your own and guarantee that they're going to be safe because you're building your own and your hands are on them, or find a company that can guarantee they're going to be safe.
I don't want to go into that business.
No.
I don't think anybody else does either. This ARC out of Tennessee or Kentucky or whatever it is, they're fighting it saying, no, we did not provide a faulty product.
I think you're exactly right. Who would want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't make enough money.
Right.
To cover the liability that nobody's going to cover for you. There's no insurance company going to cover that.
No, when that first airbag went off and killed somebody because shrapnel came out of it, and they went to court and said, hey, this thing killed a family member. Well, let's verify it. The day they verified, they should have just put it and said, we're going to put this on hold, and we're going to wait judgment until we find out if there really is a problem. And when they found out there was a problem, and this was basically a shotgun in your face, they should have said, okay, this family is awarded $1,000 trillion. Everything you've ever had, everything you ever will have It's defective. You're not allowed to make airbags anymore unless you can prove there's zero issue, and there will be. I mean, it's just you should not be in business anymore. I don't understand that. And now it's not just one airbag company. It's more than one, and it's coming over into other cars. Now we're talking about these newer Acadias. Didn't you get this fixed 20 years ago when Takata first had the problem? Nope. Or let's make it simple. These are older cars. Okay, airbags expire in 10 years. It's your responsibility. You bought this car. You can have them replaced, and then somebody needs to be building them. But they've never put an expiration date on when they should be. Tires have an expiration date. And hopefully if one of those goes out, you can at least maybe maintain control and not do anything. You're at the mercy of that airbag if it's...
Yeah, thank goodness it's been horrifying for the people that had it, but so few incidents.
So few is great, but one is too many, especially if it's, you know, they really become important when that one airbag that goes off and hurts somebody belongs to the child of a senator or a president or anybody who's a governor. Somebody's important, then they get action on it. But it's crazy, but it's sad that the world works on a number system where if you say, well, there's, 300 million people here and only 1,000 of them have got injured by this, we're pretty safe. I don't know. Cars, safety. Overall, we do have a lot of cars, Chris. A lot of cars on the road. There's more cars in California than there are people, right? I think that's Google that. I think
can't be.
Google it.
No way.
Google it. I think there are.
No way.
I'll bet you $20 that is the fact. There's more cars in California than there are
Before
people.
I finish typing that.
I'm thinking over here if I want to get in on this bet.
You in on this action, Doug?
Side, you going to take a side going on with the, I can't, I'm looking.
Russ seems so confident in this one.
Because I think I heard this on one of their radio stations just the other day.
Does this count,
That's why I'm throwing
does
it
this
out
count
there.
all the people that moved out of California?
Nah, it's just cars in
does
California.
It count working cars?
Just
Or-
cars. I think
registered
it is.
vehicles.
I think
That's
it's
the only way you can
registered
measure it.
vehicles.
Okay, I'm going to hit enter.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see what we got.
Can't be. There's like a.
It's a casual bet. The $20 isn't real here. It's,
All right, then I'm in.
No, that's real bucks.
All right. I think. I don't take this lightly. I don't take a $20 bet lightly or $1.
Hey Siri, are there
Ah,
more
stop
cars
it!
than people in
Why
California?
would you do that?
Because I'm impatient.
Vehicles per 1,000 people in California, 840.
Oh, I owe you $20.
Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Vehicles
right?
per 1,000 people. Number one is, why does it rank them? Oh, it ranks them by
State?
population. So they're ranked in order of population.
No. The whole place.
No.
Is there even one that has more cars than people? Then that would be possible. If there's not even one that's more cars than people, it's not possible.
Delaware,
No, I'm talking
Nebraska,
about California.
I know. I'm telling you the ones that have more than one per person, which is a shock to me. Delaware, Nebraska, Vermont, Alaska, Alabama, Idaho, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana.
Now, South Dakota, I know for a fact there's a reason for that.
Because there's 4 people in South Dakota.
No, more cars than people. That is not the case. There are not more cars here than people. There are more cars registered here than people because you can register a car in any of the 50 states in the state of South Dakota just by sending your registration in.
And we don't have a super active retirement system for getting rid of the old VINs and titles when they're crushed and destroyed.
But so we're not the only state to do this. A lot of
it's
states do
changed.
that.
These are different per year. Oh, that was 20. The latest is 2017.
That's the latest?
That is the latest that I have.
New.
Alabama, Nebraska, Iowa, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming all have more than one per person. Not even us anymore, as of 2017. Let's go back.
That's 6 years ago.
Yeah. What do you want from me?
A lot has happened in 6
I didn't
years.
do it.
The country changed in the last.
California has more cars than any other state.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. There you
say
go.
800 to 1,000. That's pretty close to 1-to-1.
But it's not. So $20. I'm like, man, I heard it. Had to be true. I heard it from the media.
How many car registrations you think California had? Now, this is 2018. That's the latest in this study.
40 million?
15 million.
Oh, I'm way high.
Yeah.
Cars?
Yeah. Cars. 15 million cars registered in California in 2018. The population was 39,500,000.
That doesn't match that number. That's more than twice as many. That'd be less than 500
All
per
these
1,000.
statistics are skewed to match whoever ran the report.
That's right. So maybe I heard it.
See, I just, you
Who's
can't
that
find
comedian that says, statistics are never right? He goes 500% of whatever people are made. He says, I've heard that so many statistics are made up on the spot. He goes, I just made that statistic up myself. You remember that? I can't remember what that is, but you know.
All right. There's a to be determined. I think we'll just put a pin in that one. By the way, have you noticed that since we started the after show, that's the computer's now working perfectly? What's up with that? Oh, it didn't. Oh, yeah. I don't know.
It looked at me. It knew I was going to say something. It's tuned into my brain.
Yeah, it was ready.
Yeah, there's AI going on here. There's some AI going on. See, it's not coming to me at all. Now it did.
All right. That'll do it for the Under the Hood show, the after show, and the regular show, and a few other things. I don't know. Happy holiday weekend. Drive safe.
All honor and respect to our fallen servicemen and women.
Absolutely. And one of the deadliest weekends of the year, especially in South Dakota. South Dakota leads the nation in Memorial Day weekend per capita. So
For traffic deaths or just deaths in general?
Traffic.
And one of the lowest populated states.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's per capita.
Well, there's a lot of things people need to be safe at.
okay.
We already had a tragic accident at one of our lakes with a drowning this year. People are, I think after the long winter, they're eager to get out and do things, but just cool it down a little bit. Take your time.
You ever have the feeling that you just opened a conversation you shouldn't have? I've had a few so far today on the after show. We just went,
Yeah,
right?
let's put a pin in it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.